Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on one of the absolute most majestic facades in human history, ancient Rome. Now, when we think of Rome, our minds immediately jump to those gleaming marble columns and brilliant philosophers, right? We picture this glorious empire of unmatched civic achievement that literally laid the foundations for our modern world. But today, we're looking behind those pristine monuments to examine the very real, very gritty foundation they were actually built upon. We're exploring the great illusion, the human cost of the Roman Empire.
So ask yourself this: what if your life was worth less than a ticket to a show? It's a pretty chilling thought, isn't it? Just imagine living in a world where your very existence, your humanity, is entirely stripped away. In ancient Rome, this wasn't some dystopian hypothetical. It was the absolute daily reality for countless people. Millions were treated not as human beings with dreams or rights, but as mere tools. They were literal property. And in some of the absolute most brutal cases, they existed for one reason only: to provide a few minutes of fleeting entertainment for the masses.
Let's start with Section 1, the Grand Illusion, a superpower's facade.
Moving right along to Section 2, the engine of conquest, fueling the machine. To really wrap our heads around Rome, we have to look at the sheer awe-inspiring scale of this civilization. I mean, it operated as an unparalleled superpower, building this insane network of paved roads, bustling megacities, and highly disciplined armies. But here's the thing: an empire of that magnitude doesn't just build itself out of thin air. It requires a massive, continuous influx of resources. Those majestic cities and vast road networks, they were directly powered by relentless military campaigns. And what's really interesting about this next point is the aftermath of a Roman victory. It was devastating for the conquered. Every single time the legions secured a win on the battlefield, the conquest didn't just end with a signed treaty. It ended with captives. Thousands of prisoners were taken per battle. Imagine that terrifying reality for a second. People who had just survived a brutal war were suddenly marched far away from their homelands, totally stripped of their personal freedom. They were funneled straight into bustling marketplaces, creating an endless, tragic supply of captive labor to be dispersed across the continent just to keep the great Roman machine running.
Let's transition to Section 3, a human economy, the system of slavery.
See, beneath all those celebrated laws and fancy senatorial debates, there was this very dark economic machinery that actually powered Rome. This wasn't just a society that, happened to have slaves on the side. This was an economy fundamentally built upon and entirely dependent on a massive system of forced labor. Millions. That number is just staggering. It's so easy for us to read history as a dry series of dates and battles, but we can never forget the sheer volume of ordinary people packed into that single word. Millions of individuals. We're talking mothers, fathers, skilled artisans, and farmers, all forcibly absorbed into the Roman labor machine, ripped from their lives to endure conditions they had absolutely zero control over. And this brilliantly illustrates just how entirely dependent the empire was on this forced labor across literally every single sector. Out in the farms and vineyards, enslaved people were responsible for relentless, back-breaking agricultural production just to keep the empire fed. Down in the mines, they faced incredibly dangerous, often deadly extraction work deep underground, pulling wealth from the earth in horrific conditions. Over in construction, it was their physical toll, their sweat and blood, that raised the grand monuments we still marvel at today. And even in the households, they were subjected to constant domestic servitude. The entire society, from the food on the table to the literal roof over their heads, was completely propped up by people denied basic human rights.
To really grasp this, we have to look at a pretty grim definition: commodity, a tradable economic good. To the powerful elite of Rome, people were exactly that, just commodities. They could be bought, sold, and traded exactly like you'd trade grain or iron. Human lives were seamlessly integrated into this vast, unfeeling economic system. Picture coins changing hands across these massive trade routes, funding luxurious, sprawling villas, all exchanged for the lives and labor of actual human beings. It was, quite literally, the complete and total objectification of life.
Now let's look at Section 4, blood as entertainment, the arena.
So the commodification of human beings didn't just stop at economics and manual labor. Oh no, it extended far beyond that, moving from the silent suffering of the fields right into the deafening roar of public spectacle. These were spectacles that made others incredibly famous and wealthy. Enslaved people, prisoners of war, criminals, they were forced into horrific, deadly arena competitions. Tens of thousands in the crowds would gather, absolutely screaming and cheering on the bloodshed, while the organizers of these brutal games built massive political influence and fortunes right off the backs of those dying in the sand. It's a completely chilling reality where your desperate fight for survival was literally just Saturday afternoon entertainment for somebody else. Which leads us to Section 5, the Spartacus Rebellion, rising against Rome.
But you know what? The human spirit is incredibly hard to break entirely. So the crucial point here is that not everyone just accepted this oppressive, brutal system quietly. Even against the overwhelming, terrifying power of the Roman legions, resistance was bound to happen. It started out relatively small, localized resistance and unrest breaking out against the gladiator system. That sparked a daring, incredibly dangerous escape sequence by a small group of captives led by Spartacus, and the idea spread like wildfire. As word got out, the rebel army rapidly grew in size, pulling in thousands of escaped slaves who figured they had absolutely nothing left to lose. Ultimately, this massive makeshift force marched right through Italy, successfully shaking Rome's ultimate power to its very core. Think about that. A global superpower suddenly terrified by the very people it considered property.
Spartacus became a symbol of resistance against oppression. Even though the rebellion was ultimately and brutally crushed by the Roman military machine, his legacy endured. Spartacus represented a profound, dangerous challenge to Rome's core illusion. He proved, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that the millions of voiceless individuals propping up the empire still possessed the fire and the will to fight for their dignity. It fundamentally challenged the moral authority of Rome itself.
And finally, Section 6, the true cost behind the monuments.
Whenever we visit ruins today or watch reconstructions of ancient Rome, man, it is so easy to get totally lost in the architectural brilliance. But we really have to look past the marble. Because in reality, there were two Romes. On one side, you have the wealthy palaces and villas. This is the Rome of senators, emperors, and elite citizens just living it up in unprecedented luxury, surrounded by philosophy and art. But that world only existed because of the second Rome, the dark mines and overworked laborers. This is the gritty, completely unseen reality of the millions of workers, captive soldiers, and enslaved people who were the actual backbone of the society. You literally cannot have the first Rome with the profound suffering of the second.
So the core truth we have to face is this: great civilizations can achieve incredible things while completely denying human dignity. Rome undoubtedly changed the world forever. It gave us innovations in law, language, and engineering that literally still shape our daily lives. But why does this actually matter to us now? Because history isn't just about massive empires and glowing achievements on a map, it's fundamentally about people. The millions of ordinary people who lived, worked, and often suffered under those grand systems. We have to be able to admire the amazing achievements of the past while remaining incredibly clear-eyed about their true human cost.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one single lingering question to think about. As we look back at the grand sweep of history, and as we look at the monumental achievements of human civilization around us even today, who pays the price for empire?